live in 2 seconds. There we go. We are live with Greg Hodgin, third episode. You guys just haven't seen the two prior episodes that we did. Greg's an interesting guy, a Star Trekky guy, so I'd love to have him on and discuss about potential future. Has a nice background into observing humans, builds tribes and countries, and possibly knows what keeps a country together, how to build a country, which is why I'm having him on today to discuss about extra-planetary colonies. I want to build my own country, possibly do an A/B test on Earth, but eventually out of this planet Earth. And Greg will answer my questions regarding this. So, Greg, I kind of interrupted your thinking on that last one, but we were basically discussing about that 100 humans with guns. The human that would win would reunite a pack of humans, and that our brains are a very powerful weapon. Our ability to communicate and cooperate is also our human strength. So from there, and I mean, that's what happened possibly historically. If we would want to somewhat reproduce that model on other planets, let's say that I have my community and so forth, should I call it the Charles community? Because if it's too Charles centered, it will become somewhat of a cult. How can I, or should I even have a colony with humans? I don't want to impose my will on them. They need to agree that I have something special, I guess, more value to add than I can take, and that I can bring them further. Okay, let's start with that way. Is leadership a good thing, or should I have like a council of multiple humans that would have equal powers as I do?
Oh, you have really tapped into one of the basic core questions of political science, which is what's the best way to do leadership? Because when you put all your power in one person, it's very easy to make very easy decisions and move forward. Problem is that they make a mistake, you have just drove yourself off a cliff, right? And this is one of the major differences actually between presidential systems and parliamentary systems. In a presidential system, you pick one person and they can just go, right? You still have some checks and balances, but the presidential systems, usually they can kind of go have an independent path. When it comes to parliamentary systems, on the other hand, you have to keep control of your parliament. If you don't, they're going to yank you down. And there's a lot of back and forth between that. Sometimes you want someone in crisis. Sometimes you want someone in power in crisis to move forward and just do what they need to do. Sometimes you don't want that, right? And it's going to depend on what's going on. To answer your question, though, let's discuss a 19th century sociologist named Max Weber. He actually discussed exactly what you're talking about, which is how does power become legitimate? What makes power legitimate? And there's three sources that he discussed. One was basically historical legitimacy, which is, look, we've always had a king. We're always going to have a king. They've just been that way for a long time. That's just the way it is, right? That is no longer as credible as it was thousands of years ago. We don't usually just go, oh, that's just the way we've been doing it, right? We question things a lot more. The second was what you're talking about. You know, if we talk about the Charles Republic or the Charles Company or the Charles, country, that's what we call charismatic leadership. That's charismatic authority, which is you're following me. You're following me because I have the ideas, and yes, charismatic authority, by the way, is how most cults get started, right? That is what cults are. The third one is the one that you're thinking about. That's called the rational legal legitimacy. That's the rational legal authority. That is, we have designed laws so that no one person or no one group can completely run everything at all times. And it's designed so that no one is above the law. Even the president or even the prime minister can be tried for these things, right? And the reason that we do that is because anthropologists have discovered that above about, you're going to love this, above about 150 people, we can't know everybody personally, right? So above 150 people, it becomes a bit weird. So a perfect example, I'm assuming that at some point you've gone to a store, correct? If you have, did you know the person across from you? Like, do you even know their name? No, you don't know their name. But you walk in and know that the transaction is going to happen a certain way. I'm going to give them money and I exchange something, right? Why do you know that's going to happen? Because you live in a rational legal framework that the state has produced. The rational legal framework is, look, if I go in and ask for a service, even if I don't know the person's name, we still have this basis that we can begin doing our transaction with, right? The person behind the counter can chase you out. They can tell you no. That'd be a little weird, but you don't need another name or who their friends are. You don't need to do a friend or foe thing, right? A lot of early humans, when they built up their tribes, it wasn't about making sure that we were all friends. It was making sure you are not an enemy. You're not going to kill me. Great person who discusses this is by the guy by the name of Jared Diamond. He's done a lot of work in Papua New Guinea, where you see a lot of agricultural societies and also still a lot of these much more primitive societies. And a lot of them are not about, you don't see what you see today of like, I can walk up to a stranger and talk to them. It's much more like, how do I know you? And you go down the lines and find out, we're 6 cousins once removed. So you're not an enemy. I don't have to kill you now, right? Because early times, humans used to be, if I see another human, I don't know them, that's a threat. Now we're like, I don't really care because the state has kind of taken away that ability to do that. That's a rational legal framework. The main reason that we do that, or how we do that, is something called, again, Weber discussed this as well, the monopoly on the use of coercive force. So without a state, I can do whatever I want to. And that sounds great, right? The problem is that if someone gets 5 people with guns together and creates a little army and I'm only one person with a gun, they outgun me every time. You start seeing these, and start seeing a lot of endemic violence. You see a lot of people kind of coming back and forth, right? The reason that states exist, the main reason that states exist and why people appreciate the bargain of the state is that murder rates and violent crime in states drop so much compared to these other societies. I mean, it's insane how low we are. You can go and shop with somebody and then I can pull a gun on you. This is based on that rational legal authority that we discussed beforehand. So when we discuss what you want to do for a state, you don't want them to follow you. You want them to follow the ideals that you want to set up. Now, you might represent that. You want them to have a voice. Absolutely. And here's where it gets really messy. Everyone has the best intentions when they walk in. All right. Robert Mugabe is a perfect example. In 1979, he actually helped lead Rhodesia's independence. Then it became Zimbabwe. He was this really far-thinking thinker. He was so cool. He was thinking really far ahead. He stayed in office. He stayed in office. He stayed in office. And he stayed in office. And he died a corrupt dictator. Right. You can tell very quickly what norms will help create a country and moving forward when you see someone not amending their constitution or their laws to allow someone to run for longer office or voluntarily not running. South Africa and the United States are great examples. George Washington ran for 2 terms. They basically said, we will keep voting you in office forever. And he's like, no, that's a terrible precedent. It's a terrible norm I'm setting up. Nelson Mandela, after his 2 terms, he could have amended the constitution because he's Nelson Mandela. He said, no. That's one of the main reasons why South Africa has not fallen into civil war. You still see political maneuvering, but compared to other countries in that region, no, not so much, right? So those norms, those setting into stone, these ideas, these concepts is much more important than any one person because you are going to die no matter what. If you have built a cult and you do not have a clear line of succession, that's the problem, right? One of the wonderful things about democracies is dictatorships are very stable until the dictator dies, because it's very difficult to kind of figure out. That's why monarchies were the way they were, because it's just the first kid, it's just the second kid, it's just so on and so forth, right? Pretty clear line of succession, unless of course that first kid dies, and then you got 5 people who are trying to go for the spot, right? Dictatorship is the same way. When Kim Jong-un dies, there's gonna be this huge fight over who does this. The point of democracy is all that violence that happens during succession of that changes of power, we actually create avenues for non-violent means to rectify them, right? Good example. One of the main points of the state, if you want to talk about pure capitalism, capitalism requires a strongly functioning state. Why? You and I have a contract. You give me $100. I don't know. You loan me money, and I have to pay you back in a certain amount of time. You go, okay, cool. You give me $100. You come back and say, hey, listen, you owe me money. I say, screw you. I'm not going to pay you. What do? You go to court and you sue me. Also, of course, there's a personal cost. If I come back to you and ask you for $500, you're of course going to say no, but you want your money back. So you take me to court. You have to have a well-functioning court system, and the court system can't just be like I show up and go, oh, I won't pay it. What are you going to do? Throw my ass in jail. That's where the coercive part comes in. No one wants to talk about this is the dirty secret of politics. Every system in the world, no matter what, dictatorship, democracy, whatever, when it all comes down to it, it boils down to if they really want to, the state can force you to do something. People hate that, but you can see why it's necessary, because if the state can't force you to do anything, that means that no one's in charge. If no one's in charge, that basically means anarchy comes up. People go, oh, anarchy's fine, Once past 150 or so, we already had that section of history. Once past 150 or so, these are strangers. Let's shoot them. I don't know them. Now you have endemic warfare. Also, states stop the cycle of revenge. You killed my brother. I'm going to kill you. No, no, no. The state comes in and interposes itself between you and that person. Now, because you kill my brother, the state acts as me. The state says, you've hurt me by murdering one of my citizens. Now I'm going to take you, which means I have the right of vengeance taken away because I trust the judicial system to get the job done. Guess what? Now I don't go back and kill his brother or his sister, who then comes back and kills my first cousin, who kills. You stop these cycles of revenge immediately, right? This is what leads to this thing. It's not the best trade-off, right? But to go back to your original point, how do you build this? The answer is you set up a frame of laws. And I like your idea of like almost like a council of elders. You have people who sit down and you write out your laws. We call, of course, that a constitution, right? And you design it in such a way where it's rigid enough to get the job done and give people the maximum amount of individual liberty and freedoms that you want to, but you give it enough power so that when you have bad actors, because you always have bad actors. What was his name? James Madison, who helped write the U.S. Constitution, said, "Listen, if men were angels, there'd be no need for government. People are assholes." And you can quote me on that one. Power, especially, and there's been a lot of recent psychological studies been done on this, power corrupts people, right? You know, Robert Mugabe, great example. He came with the best intentions. Papa Doc Duvalier in Haiti had best intentions. All dictators usually think they're doing the right thing. Hitler woke up every morning thinking he was doing the best thing for Germany, right? And it doesn't matter. He was able to convince himself every day that he was doing the right thing, right? There has to be mechanisms to make sure that bad actors do not, if they aren't in power, they don't get into power. If they are in power, to keep them from continuing in power.
Right.
And that's a tough thing to do. So I've rambled for a bit. I know I've jumped over a lot of topics, but
no,
you can
it's
see
really
why.
instructive. I agree with pretty much all of the above. Meat would be a blockchain-based AGI that would be at the top. Then in between, there would be a council of elders, of smart humans that would be neuralinked, obviously. And everyone would evolve. Because my question to you is, how do you create a better democracy? Because US has been quite successful at promoting the American dream. Everything considered equal, it still has a good reputation worldwide. Objectively, there's progress, or subjectively, should I say. So how do you create something better than that? Meat would be entrepreneur land, as I told you. There would be a lot of technology. There would be a lot of data, a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, I agree. And you're not wrong. I would say this. The American Constitution, the American experiment was a great first generation democracy, right? The thing is that it's been 200 years. The U.S. Constitution, I don't know if you know this, is the world's shortest extant constitution. We have the shortest constitution in the world. And that includes all the amendments. In fact, I was just showing this to a friend of mine. I'm going to hold one up right now. This is a constitution. This is Germany's constitution. It is 140 something pages. You know who wrote it? Americans. Do you know why? Because we beat the shit out of them. And yes, but American political scientists came over and said, look, they were like, we want an American system. And we were like, no, that's shit. Do not want that. Here's all the mistakes that we've made. Let's show you how to fix this. And Germany actually has one of the more stable constitutions because they don't have constitutional crises like the United States does because it's 140 pages long, right? People hate long documents. No one wants to read that. Everyone's like, the U.S. Constitution is so simple, so easy. This is a 21st century smartphone, right? This is an Galaxy S22. You know exactly what this is. You know how cool it is, all that good stuff, right? It's one of the most advanced pieces of technology in the world right now, correct?
Yeah.
Hardware is amazing. Imagine you're running DOS on this. That's the United States right now. We have amazing hardware. Our infrastructure is awesome. We have amazing people. We have all this stuff. The software's shit. The software's garbage because it's so out of date. It's so difficult to change the Constitution now. There's a lot of ambiguity in it. But with that being said, that does not mean that you can't fix it or make a better democracy. You absolutely can. I have, especially in the last 20 years, with the last couple of ways of democratization, the question has been, how do you build not the perfect democracy, but the least bad democracy? Because my idea of a perfect democracy is someone else's idea of hell, right? Whenever someone, I always do this when I teach my classes, I'm like, what's your idea of utopia? And the thing is that a lot of people are like, oh, it's a socialist paradise where we have all this stuff. And then some other people are like, well, I'm a religious fundamentalist Christian. That sounds like hell to me. Like, these are two very different concepts, but people's definition of utopia of the perfect democracy is going to be different.
Personalized law, some kind of chat GPT that would be for every single citizen. Laws wouldn't apply to all, but you'd get a problem with that. With your specific beliefs, values, and situation, you would have this, and that. You could ask a very simple app about like, hey, can I do this? Would that affect my neighbor in a positive or negative way? Something that's more personalized.
Assuming that the AI can take into account all intended and unintended consequences, right? One of the big issues we have with politics is the fact that you can have the best law with the perfect idea, like this is the best way we can do this, and so on and so forth. Humans being human is going to go, that sounds cool. And then you put it into action, all of a sudden, oh my God, like it's doing something totally different from what we expected, right? And there's so many examples of this when it comes to passing laws of that nature. Perfect example, you're in Mexico. You're actually in the case study that comparativists use when people go, term limits are good. We should use term limits. Term limits are great. Mexico actually stopped imposed term limits on its House. Is it the Chamber of Deputies? I think it is, for several years. They stopped doing it. The reason is, hey, term limits are good. That means you're going to get fresh people coming in and so on and so forth, right? Guess what? If I've only got 3 terms and I'm on my 3rd term, do I have any power? No. I can't run for re-election. I leave. My staff leaves. New person comes in. You know who's still there? Lobbyists. People who have been there for 20 years. Guess who now has all the institutional power? Guess who now understands how the system works? You're learning new. You're brand new. Guess what? By the end of the 3 terms, if I wipe everybody out, guess what else I wiped out? The leadership. How do I build a coalition? How do I build like people together? How can I get people to actually work towards voting? It turns out that in Mexico, they did term limits for a while, and it was so terrible, they repealed term limits. It was so awful because of these unintended consequences. In fact, it's one of the few things that, like, almost every political scientist who does comparative politics goes, term limits are a bad idea. People go, oh, I love term limits, I love term limits. It sounds good, right? It sounds like a good idea. It's a terrible idea. Do not get me wrong. Like, the other side's also not that good too, but the thing about a skill set is, my usual example I go to is Nancy Pelosi. You might like her or you might hate her, but she has the skill set. She gets shit done, right? And people think that politics is not a skill set, but you have to build coalitions. You have to figure out what trade-offs you need to do to get something passed. You have to figure out how to whip people to make sure they'll stay on your train, how to make sure that you get the fundraising moving. Like, there's all these pieces moving together, right? Also, when to say things, when not to say things. Like, there's so many pieces of that skill set that most people either take for granted or don't see at all. That requires time. That requires you being in the legislative branch for years to get these things, right?
Some Wikipedia structure, everyone needs to participate. Citizens need to become government. So it's some kind of software at the back end of that. The highest participator get higher role. The more energy, the more value I add to the system, the more I can have voting power. We vote on pretty much everything.
So here's an issue with that.
What about people that don't participate? Right, is the question.
No. I don't care about that. I don't care about that at all. Here's my issue. There's let's say that you can do that with 100 people. That'd be relatively easy, right? Now let's discuss 5,000 people. To actually vote effectively, let's say there's a piece of legislation on the board that's about, I don't know, trade tariffs or something else, like something esoteric, right? Now I've got to spend time and energy to research that stuff, to assimilate it, to make sure I understand what's going on before I vote, right? If there's 50 pieces of legislation and I'm spending 20 minutes on each one, that's my day. The whole reason that we vote for representatives is so that that's their job, because
the AI would write these, and then it would be like a simple vote, like you're being sent on LinkedIn. What do you think is best? It would be like
that's
some
fine.
kind of chat
But
GPT.
would you be? But would you be? Could I read the legislation? Could I do my own research?
It would be
or
very
am I just
simple.
Being told? But here's the problem with simple, right? And this is where it gets fun with politics and the law, right? Let's discuss simple. All right. Well, let's give everybody. Let's make sure that everybody has gets 8 hours of sleep a night, or let's make sure that everyone's got housing. How do you take that idea and operationalize it into something that works? And that's not going to be a paragraph, is it? That's going to be a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's going to be micro task. There could be a TLDR version for citizens. If they want, they can ask it more questions.
Okay, cool. But that's still time that they're burning, right? That's still time. So let's discuss this. In the United States, and even you, when you go vote, do you look up every single candidate and figure out their policies?
No, but I'd ask to my best intention and best to the best extent, the best questions I can ask about that person to a ChatGPT.
Yeah, and that's fine. Now, here's the problem with that, though. ChatGPT is only as good as who programs it, and we've seen that ChatGPT sometimes degrades. And I understand AI is going to get better, and that's fine. But here's the other thing: what if, what if you're asking them that, and they're only giving you some answers or whatever, and you're spending 2 hours to do this, but the ballot's 8 pages long, because we're going all the way from city dog catcher to president. That's a lot of time. The reason that this works in modern democratic society is something you're going to hate. This is why parties exist, because parties get to say, here is our platform. Ask the party. Now, you basically using brand identification. I see the D or the R or the I or the S or whatever. Oh, good. I know they're going to vote this way. I don't have to do all this work. It's not because we're lazy, because we shouldn't have to replicate the effort. It's on the party to produce a clear and effective marketing message of what they're going to do when they're in power, right? And that saves me time, because now I don't have to go through 8 pages and look up every damn candidate. I can look up the party's standpoints. Yeah. And however you want to build this, you're going to have parties, because it's impossible to run. There's some very small countries that don't have party systems, but they're below 50,000 people. Above that, you're going to have party systems. And this helps solve this information paradox crisis that you're discussing. Like, you want everyone to read the legislation, sure. Problem is, when the legislation is if each piece of legislation is 10 pages long, and you've got 20 things, ChatGPT can summarize it. But what if you're missing that one line that talks about the $10 million that's being sent over to the lobbyist, right? Or the $20 billion. People insert line items into shit like this all the time, specifically for that reason. Right?
Yeah, well, you'd have your personal kind of assistant or OS that would know what's important for you. I guess it's about the numbers, like, what do I care? I care about like this household, this household is a community of 4 humans. Then what do I care after that? My street. How many folks are there on that street? 100.
You're discussing human organization. You got the small micro unit, and then slightly bigger, slightly bigger, slightly bigger. And the bigger it is, the less power you have over it.
There you go. So like, how can we align incentives for folks to really care about, well, they really care about their small household. Then there's decisions on the street level, and then on the neighborhood level, and then on the national level, which doesn't matter that much, but it would be redistributed that way, and incentives would be aligned. Like, if I'm voting on that, it might affect my economic outcome. It might affect my health. So how can we better that system?
But here's the problem. Here's one of the issues that you see in political science. You think that people vote logically, and they do, but your logic isn't their logic. Perfect example. The prisoner's dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put a Catholic nun in there. Is she going to sell out the other person? Never. She's an altruist. That's what she does. That's who she is. So when you apply rational theory to her, she's not being logical, is she? But in her mind, of course she is. In fact, there is no other choice for her.
To her values,
mob boss, correct, her values, right? And a lot of voting is weighing these. Is my economic value, for instance, I vote left wing, right? I want more taxes because I want a better social safety net for people. People go, but that's voting into economic interests. I mean, up to a point, yeah, but it's voting for my social, cultural, and political interests. And those outweigh my economic interests. People don't just vote with their pocketbooks. Yes, some people do, absolutely. But some people vote for their religious beliefs. Some people vote for their social beliefs, their cultural beliefs. Some people vote because they want to tell people to piss off. Like, some people vote what we call negatively. They're just like, I hate everybody, so I'm going to vote the most shitty I possibly can just to send a signal, right?
Right.
And there is logic in that illogic, right? And that's why parties actually kind of coordinate what's going on, so they can be like, look, here's what we believe in, here's what's going on. And you'll notice a lot of parties do, like, here's our economic platform, our cultural platform, our social platform. You might not care about the economics, but you're very big in this one issue of culture. Well, that's who we stand for. Well, they get my vote. That's fine, right? So to answer your question, because it's so individualized, you're enhancing humans, and that's great. to get people to care about national stuff. That's why parties exist as well, because they actually engage in mobilization. Now let's discuss how to get them to vote. Australia has what's called compulsory voting. If you don't vote, you get fined. Like, end of story. So they have like 98% voting. Problem is that you can just go in and check some boxes and spoil your ballot, and that still counts as voting, right? You still don't care, right? Yes, you're showing up, but you just don't care. You're doing it to avoid the fee. Most politics is about two things. What's the carrot and what's the stick? How do I motivate people to do something? And how do I punish people for doing the wrong thing? And that sounds really basic, but that's all what human psychology is, right? Yep. How do you get people to have that serotonin boost? And how do you whack somebody when they do something stupid? Most laws, not all of them, but most laws are designed with the stick in mind. If you don't do X, Y, or Z, you get punished. Now, there are some countries that are actually doing it very differently. Scandinavian countries, I'm not making this one up. This is a great story. They followed an old woman for like 30 minutes to cut her a check for not breaking any laws, because they actually ran her plates. She hadn't broken any traffic laws in 60 days. So they rewarded her. And she thought she was in trouble because, of course, when the cop's behind you and they have the lights on, of course, you think you did something. They cut her a check. Lo and behold, because of that, the number of traffic incidents decreased a lot. I think it was Sweden by like 50%. Because they're like, I mean, maybe the cop showing up isn't awful, right? Maybe I'm being rewarded. So all of a sudden, all people started driving safer, because there was the concept of, I could get punished, but I could get rewarded for being a good boy. So using a combination like this might work. So for instance, you want to get people invested? Cool. If you vote in X number of elections, you get a tax cut, or we're going to cut you a check or something like that, right? Or you have access to a premium thing. I don't know. But that's going to also lead to people who just do it to get the benefits, and they're not actually thinking about stuff, right? There's a very nice axiom in politics, and this is something you got to keep in your head. Everybody lies. Everybody lies, right? When we discuss surveys, we have to word it in a certain way. Perfect example in the United States. I'm going to ask you two questions. They're the same question, but when you hear it, you're going to see why it's different. Do you believe in socialized medicine? Question one. Hold on. Think about it from an American perspective. Two, do you believe in Medicare? Are you in support of Medicare? Guess what? Those are the same thing. Not really. Those are the same thing. Those are the same thing. But when I say socialized healthcare, that's going to activate a bunch of stuff in a lot of people's heads where they are either, I'm totally for it, or I hate it. Medicare is already a government program. People go, oh, I like that, and so on. So, because the words I've used, I have changed the way the survey happened. So we actually have to sit down and really figure out how to ask survey questions correctly, how to ask these questions correctly, right? And ChatGPT will help, but it will not be perfect, because human psychology is wonky like that. Like, it really, really is. It'll help you get there. Like, you'll get you a couple of iterations, but people are weird, man. Like, Pepe the Frog is a good example. It was a children's book that now stands for alt-right nationalists. Like, that's so bizarre, but people will take random things and make it into something new if it's not serving them correctly. People are highly adaptive. ChatGPT might be able to catch up, but here's the issue. ChatGPT is driven. Well, incentive and punishment. Listen, if you don't want to vote, that's fine. But if you don't vote for a certain number of times, remember how you're discussing the tiered voting? Cool. If you don't vote X number of times, you drop down to whatever. You don't have it taken away, but your vote's no longer as powerful, right? Yeah. But to incentivize people, because look, I might be at this level, I'm pretty happy, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but if I show up every time and I vote, effectively, I can kind of jump to the next one. But then the question becomes, how do you decide what effectively is? Just because they put the marks in the paper, or just because they put in the votes, doesn't mean they believe in what they're actually voting for. They might just be filling in bubbles to get money.
And it also depends about their education and their, I call it firepower. They might be voting because they saw a Trump ad and they're totally uneducated about whatever topic, or hateful voting, like you mentioned. In 5 minutes, how do I start my colony on another planet? So I just had the insight that obviously I wouldn't be the authoritarian leader. That wouldn't end up well for me.
You'll get shot.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I just don't think people would want that, or sound people. No. I need other like intelligent, educated folks in that, heart-centered as well. So I need to start small. Also, is another insight that I got, because the numbers matter and the scale.
I can tell you exactly what to do. You ready?
Yeah, in 4.
Okay, in 4 minutes. The ISS, the International Space Station, is actually being decommissioned in 2030. Buy it. Put people up there.
Oh, shit.
Build a small orbital platform. That's the idea. Each of the orbital platforms will be a different state trying a different thing. If you want to build a federation of them, you can have like 5 of them and they all have like a national government if you want to, or you can leave them all 5 separate. Or build a generational ship. It orbits basically like a comet. It orbits the sun and comes back again. So you can pick up all your power when you're going in for solar and come back out again. You don't have to go to a planet to create your new thing. You can build on an asteroid. You can build in orbit. You can build, you don't have to build. People keep thinking that you have to have land. Why? Space is infinite. You can build your own land, right? It's the equivalent of building like an offshore platform, like sea land, like we discussed beforehand, right? Build that. Invite your 200 people up there. See where it goes. 200 is small enough to not be massively terrible, but big enough where you're going to start seeing some of these political issues come up, right? Because 4 people, you have to get along. That's a family. That's not politics. That's anthropology. 200, 300, 500, 1,000. Now we're discussing a small town. That's enough where you need some sort of governmenting structure. And they send you up and you learn your lessons and you kind of go from there, right? That's how you do it. ISS is being decommissioned in what, 7 years? You can buy that. I think they're looking to deorbit it, or if you have the money, just buy it.
Right. Which is interesting. Should be a big transaction, like at least 100 million, if not more. But what would happen if I would reunite like just entrepreneurs and founders? Would there be more ego in the mix?
Yes, of course there is, because
so we need like these folks that also just listen and consume. We don't only need leaders in one room. Is that
correct?
What
you know
I
what they're
should
called
get from that?
That's partially it, but you also have to figure out a way for you to manage egos without people getting pissed off and leaving, right? Because one of the things about what you're doing is, if they're in orbit, it's going to be difficult to leave. They're going to have to stay there. So there has to be nonviolent mechanisms to do that. You know what we call those? The courts. That's why they exist. NGOs, certainly, that's civil society. Like we're a society of bowlers or whatever, right? But really, it's the courts. So-and-so said this and da-da, I'm suing them. Okay, fine. Go to court and have the conversation. Do not pull out guns and kill each other. I still need the human capital. The goal here is to create nonviolent means of dealing with conflict, because humans will always have conflict. How do you ensure that you create lots of lanes for nonviolent confrontation? That's the main paradox of politics. If you can't do that, you are correct. The egos will come up and they will start killing each other.
Oh, interesting answer. Well, Greg, thank you again for coming on the pod and blow my mind here. So yeah, slowly but surely a mental roadmap is developing. Not sure about the space station. Seems kind of complex, reparation costs and like fighting the lack of gravity. The Earth is so friendly,
It's true. That's true. And the thing is, you could build a small commune like you were discussing in Canada, but again, we've already discussed that conversation about what the issues are with that. Honestly, I'd say build on an asteroid or something like that, or build a generational ship. You can build a ship that actually rotates, then you got gravity.
Interesting. Where can people find out more about you, Greg?
Type in my name into Google and